Wilson here with me representing B-Lab, and we're covering cross-hemispheric legal partnerships, and it's on the B-Lab standards. We've heard earlier from Mari about the B-Lab's philosophy, and so I think this is a great continuation. And so just a quick intro that we do have a long-standing partnership between GAIL and B-Lab as mentioned, and we specifically have this thing called the B Corp Advocates within GAIL, which was launched at the first summit in London 2 years ago. So in a sense, it's been a continuation of a journey of collaborating and looking at B Corp as a framework for change. So if we can then move to the slides. So a bit of background in terms of what this is about. So the big shift is that B-Lab has introduced and published this year the set of new requirements that will really be a paradigm shift. So I would actually like to start inviting Akila to just share a little bit of background in terms of the standards review process as we kind of go through this. But it's also intended that we would then get a sense of how lawyers would be positioned to support B Corps and aspiring B Corps, and also understanding the B-Lab standards as a raising of the bar of what it looks like in this business as a force for good. So just by background, my practice mainly has been advising funders, financial services, asset management. So I'm a corporate commercial lawyer focusing on this. I was in the first Asia-Pacific member of SLR. There wasn't an Asia-Pacific organization then, so when GAIL was formed, then we kind of become part of GAIL. And I just launched an impact practice on this, but a bit of background is I do look at mainstreaming impact in the capital markets, and what I find is that we do need capacity building in terms of sustainability focus at the corporate level, and B-Lab standards are actually a great tool for that. And so the partnerships that we are really covering today, and which is laying the foundation for more work in partnership between GAIL and B-Lab and for impact lawyers, is this standards review project that I led when I was at Dentons. So it was a project that involved looking at the proposed B-Lab new standards over 25 jurisdictions, and it was an analysis to see if there were kind of big legal or policy or regulatory barriers in each jurisdiction. And it was felt necessary to do that because I sit on the Regional Standards Advisory Group in Asia for B-Lab. And so I've been consulted during the process around that. And so we had then this specific partnership where lawyers then come in to look at the new standards, and we'll cover some of that very briefly. And so it was a delight to kind of bring together this project as a partnership with GAIL and B-Lab and Dentons, where I was a partner then, and also with Kaidos on Argentina and Nishiburam Asahi. So it's really a group effort. And so I think that's the background. I really should turn to Akila to tell us more from the B-Lab perspectives.
Right, thank you so much, Vivian. I don't know that I have as much background as you, but a little bit about myself. I am B-Lab Global's commercial attorney. On a day-to-day basis, my work is mostly negotiating with prospective B corporations on their agreement for certification. Right now, because of the introduction of the new standards, my work involves rewriting our contracts between B-Lab and the prospective B corporations. So I'm very heads down and focused on the technical aspects of the actual contracting process. So being here and hearing about the work that impact lawyers do in their partnerships with B-Lab really it's a great learning experience, I will say that. I really appreciate being here, but I'm getting more of a perspective on the work that our partners across the globe do to support B-Lab.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and actually, in terms of, we will have a chance to look through very quickly the changes. So I'll skip this one. Just want to say a little bit more in terms of impact ecosystem is really what this is about. And so I launched a firm in the context of this vision, but more importantly, I really think this is. A momentum that we can all play a part in continue to push forward, and hope that the sharing today would help us all kind of think about our, the areas that we can support. And I think one particular question I have, this is the range of new topics that we are seeing being introduced in the new standards. And just a bit of background, up to now, the existing the new standards come in, I think, around next year. But this year and before this is due a impact assessment where you have the 80-point score, and maybe, Akila, you can tell us more about that. And then now it's going to go into very specific requirements and granular requirements over seven impact topics. So if we can, just kind of hear more about the thinking around this.
Sure. Very briefly, our previous standards for B Corp certification, we had 5 impact areas where companies would respond to, and if they scored highly enough across all of those impact areas, they would become or could become a certified B Corporation. It was a cumulative score. The separate impact topics were not scored separately necessarily when it came to the granting of certification. And we had feedback and some criticism that wasn't necessarily the right way to go about this. And we got that feedback from both within our community and from outside as well. So the introduction of the new standards, they're in part to respond to that. We introduced additional impact topics that were important, that we believed were important to our mission and to promote in our work moving forward, but also the way that we score prospective B corporations for certification. They have to meet minimum requirements in each of the 7 impact topics. So a company can't score really lowly in, for instance, environmental, stewardship, but highly in all the others in their governance and still become a certified B corporation. So the introduction of the new standards were in part to respond to that.
Yeah, so actually that's my next question, but it is sort of still going to be very aligned with B Lab's philosophy, and I have on this slide. So these are actually materials that my team has put together, because what we're doing is we're starting to look at how we can support B Corps in Asia, that, we're in the community, we're even talking about system change. But we're kind of not going to have time to go through all the details. So to spotlight some of this, if we can hear about sort of the idea around the convergence with perhaps, or the goal to meet the regulatory standards. Yes. Yeah, as the background is a bit complex because regulations is complex. Yeah.
Very complex, and I myself am still wrapping my head around it, and we're getting great advice, some of it pro bono from firms in the EU, but part of the reason for us introducing this new set of standards, and not necessarily the standards themselves, but the whole certification scheme, is a response to the ECGT regulation in the EU, to respond to greenwashing claims. And the main thing that we focus on is the introduction of a third-party certifier or verifier for our certification scheme, essentially to improve the credibility of the B Corp certification, where we introduce the standards for certification, but we have an independent third party verify all the information that we are looking at, or that is looked at for the grant of the certification. And we did this in part to be compliant with the EU regulations and potentially other regions who are seeking to introduce similar regulations in the future.
Thank you for that. And this is where I guess I start to see a shift in terms of how lawyers can support. Because having been on the Regional Standards Advisory Board, and as I was saying, and learning about the approach that BLAB was going to take, I see that, you know, there is a need for lawyers to perhaps kind of bring in their regulatory expertise across the 7 topics, because now it's no longer sort of a process, or because the B impact assessment actually more focused on what management systems you have in place, and then what process, and that has actually been sort of in the market more an area that consultants, system consultants been advising on, and not so much lawyers. And the extent of work that I've done before this with BLAB has actually been looking at the legal requirement, which is more around, can you introduce the mission log on the stakeholder governance? Can you have directors take into account different environmental, social, and stakeholder considerations other than profit? But now we are going to go beyond that because of the increasing alignment on the requirements with the regulatory or expectations globally.
Oh, and this is where the very technical nature of my job, this is showing the limitations of this. So we're getting, of course, advice from people like Vivian on the regulatory landscape out there, but we're still very much learning and determining how to translate this over to the B Corps that we support and who we certify now. So while we are working to implement the new standards, we are drafting communications to our B Corps around how they can meet the new standards, how they can become compliant with the regulations that are out there. And we are looking for people like yourselves who may be experts in these areas to advise B Corps and prospective B corporations, and also BLAB, to help us all operate in this new regulatory landscape.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to kind of go through quite quickly because this will hopefully give you a sense, right, from advising on just the legal pathways and the legal requirement. Yes. Now there's now a need and as well as an opportunity for lawyers to then help look at a number of things, like across the 7 impact topics, and then also even in terms of the foundational requirements, like from looking at the correct legal form, the legal pathways, the legal requirements, because there are also quite specific granular requirements around risk profile and also the size of companies and the time frame for compliance. So I would say that from the B impact assessment to now what you have to comply, it's like, I don't know, multifold in terms of complexity. And I think that's where lawyers have a role to play. And what I'm going to do now, if I may, is that, you know, you can stop me at any point in time. I just want to give a flavor of the extent of granularity. And I'm not going to go through in detail. And I'll just share that just for some food for thought, because what I'm doing in Asia, so I've done the workshop for Hong Kong, and I'm looking to do the workshop in Malaysia and Singapore next, and maybe a few other countries. And this is sort of picking up on the work that was done earlier when we did the jurisdictional review and understanding the regional context as well as the local jurisdictional differences, that when I compiled, my team and we compiled this set of materials, we wanted to have an easy process to complement what BLAB is doing in terms of supporting the community. And so we compiled this set. So this deck refers to like the quick way to find the standard on BLAB website and the latest guidance. And then we have the summary of the key requirements. And then, so this one is on climate action. As promised, I'm not going to go through it. We don't have time. So we have a summary of the key requirements, which you can take a quick look. I'm not going to go through it, but it's very specific and granular and differs depending on size of companies. And some topics also differs in terms of the sector. And then environmental steward and circularity similar, and so on and so forth. And so when we did this in Hong Kong, we actually supplement for each topic the sort of specific policy or regulatory context or what is already existing in that jurisdiction in terms of regulations that companies should already be aware of. So that's, I think, something that we need to do for each jurisdiction as a starting point to really help company understand that they have to take a more holistic approach. Yeah, so human rights and yes, we can pause me on any of the topic in terms of.
Right. I think it's helpful here to back up a little bit and distinguish between the different pieces that we're talking about, because I think we're in danger of sort of conflating them. So we have foundational requirements that come from B-Lab itself, that prospective B corporations have to sort of, a hurdle that they have to pass in order to even be evaluated on the impact topics. So the foundational requirements include the legal requirement, the mission lock, in your governing documents saying that you will take all stakeholders into account in your decision making. Thank you. Other eligibility requirements, such as you can't yourself as a company be like a nonprofit, things like that. Your legal form, and also you have to have been in operation for a certain minimum amount of time. And then foundational requirement 3, which includes the risk assessment. It's just evaluating whether you operate in a sensitive industry, for instance, or you can see the very granular nature of our risk tool. And then once you pass that hurdle, then and you can then be assessed. You have to be assessed across all of the impact topics, the 7 of them, and this is also where we can use the help of the impact legal community here. Because the requirements are very granular and very specific. That is a response to some of the critique that we received with the previous standards scheme, that we weren't specific in many areas, right? So having lawyers parse through all of these impact topics and the requirements for each, and helping companies see if they document their processes and policies, and then determining whether those things meet the requirements, that's really what we need help with, or what B corporations will need help with moving forward.
Yeah, and thank you. And I think this is also the beginning of a next phase in the journey in partnering, because each of these topics have outlined the granular and specificities. But there's also the question of how would you continue to monitor this, and in terms of the verification. And are you able to share a little about that in terms, even if just an inkling? Because I know it's still work in progress.
Yes, very much. We're doing a tremendous amount of work right now around getting the community prepared to certify on the new standards. Both within B-Lab itself, but also helping our current B corporations shift so that they can be able to certify under the new standards. So many of the details are still in motion. We are putting out communications on a weekly and monthly basis leading up to the implementation of the new standards, the requirement that B Corp certify under the new standards. So I can't get into specifics there. But we are regularly releasing new communications on that. In the next month, we're releasing a guide for our B corporations on what they can do to prepare themselves for certification under the new standards.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this is also to illustrate how the needs is plenty.
Right.
Because just based on the granularity of the requirements, and similarly, when you go into verification, there's a lot to consider. And this is where, when we presented this during the workshop, if I can share, it's like, companies will need to consider the regulatory compliance aspects of it, and then they will have to put in place more specific policies and procedures governance framework, which they should already have, but it is going to require operationalizing all of these requirements. And how would they demonstrate that to a level that would be satisfactory for verification? And then on the B Lab side, also thinking about the level of complexity that could come in terms of sector differences, regional differences, and also the size of companies. So that's a lot.
It's a lot, and of course this is brand new. We are just developing this. So as we have experts evaluate this, and we have our advisory boards for the standards, but while in practice, I can see a reality where something that B Lab did not anticipate arises. So we would appreciate, any hiccups in the new implementation of the standards to be brought to our attention so that we can respond to them and support the community.
Yeah, but the good news, if I may, for lawyers is that
Sure.
this is actually a lot of these is, as I was saying earlier, a convergence and alignment with regulatory standards that we're seeing. So this is where I think it's all in the same direction, same positive direction. And a lot of times you may find that companies are focused on, sorry, I'm kind of speaking from when I talk to investment managers, for example. They commonly think about ESG risks, but they also will continue to look for pipeline of good companies that have got a good handle on this. So this is increasingly becoming a common language of what good looks like. And because of the convergence with the transparency and disclosure requirements globally, like the TCFD translated into the ISSB standards. And so it is actually, as was meant, the term used on the previous panel or during the plenary is the hook, right? There is that hook for corporates to see this as meaningful, also to meet the evolving regulatory and stakeholder expectations. Yeah, so I want to draw perhaps on, just to run quickly, I think there is the human rights topic, and the supply chain topics is a case in point, because this one is on labor relations and employment arrangements. And one of the things that we mentioned, for example, in our Hong Kong workshop is, and in Asia, is talk about the gig workers law that is emerging. So one thing I want to highlight is, because this covers so many different areas, so as lawyers, we might need to think about how are we positioned to have the capacity building ourselves. So I was just sharing with Akila that when we did this standards review project, it was a huge undertaking and it was done on a pro bono basis. And in a way, it's probably benefited the lawyers just as much or more in terms of capacity building and really equipping ourselves to be able to understanding how this fits in with the broader sustainability, disclosure, and regulatory environment, and how we as lawyers can help in terms of our different areas of expertise, because you could be an employment lawyer and you haven't really looked at B Corp, and now you can see that this is meaningful. And in my work, even when it's like not necessary an advocacy for B Corp certification, I already see that there are impact investors using B Lab framework as the tool to measure and conduct due diligence on the companies. So Gale Asia Pacific, we actually did a webinar last month, which is specifically on this, and there were like 4 impact managers across Asia who talked about how they are either themselves B Corp or they use B Corp and/or they use B Corp as a framework, B Lab standards as a framework for their impact investing. So this is also relevant when, if you're an investment lawyer, to think about how you integrate this into perhaps some of the due diligence processes. So this is really building a common language and alignment. Yeah. So I guess, how can we, as lawyers interested to do more in this space, also partner and maybe the opportunity to cover what we talk about in terms of either the legal pathways or the new areas that you might be looking at? How can we actively follow up with B Lab through Gale and also just stay in touch? Do you have ideas that you can share with us?
I absolutely do. I'm taking this opportunity to reach out to everyone in this room and everyone at this conference to, if they can, look into Gale and B-Lab's Advocates Program. So B-Lab is a longtime partner with Gale. We work together, and Vivian is a part of this partnership where B-Lab seeks advice from experts around the globe to help B Corps with the legal requirement that we have, the mission lock. As new corporate structures sort of arise, or novel ones to us arise, we need people on the ground, experts, who are able to evaluate how we can accomplish getting a mission lock for those companies. And also, to a bit of a lesser extent, but still this is necessary, advocacy to get things like the benefit corporation structure passed in new jurisdictions, or at least a pathway for that, and the conversations around benefit corporations happening in new jurisdictions. So I gave a lovely letter, an open letter from B-Lab to the member or the participants in this conference, to a member of Gale, and we hope to have it shared more broadly for how you can reach out to us if you're interested in helping with this work that we really need help with. But also, you can find me and reach out to me directly, and we can put you on a list and reach out to you.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to say as well, because we do have a number of B Corp law firms within the Gale community, and it's all part of kind of growing together. And what's interesting is we also have very specific requirements. One of the impact topic, which is government affairs and collective action. I just want to mention, because this is very encouraging and inspiring, because actually it is also a way of recognizing companies that want to not only contribute themselves, but drive systemic change. And so the B Corp law firms can in particular consider this, because we will ourselves, if we're looking to become B Corps, need to meet these requirements. And so partnering with B-Lab and continue to support and being part of Gale, it's hopefully something that in alignment. Yeah, so there is a kind of list of collective action options here that I thought would be good to share.
That's really helpful. I appreciate it. And I also just want to bring up, if you're not necessarily an expert in these areas, if you speak a language other than English, even that, helping us to interpret legal terminology and the translation of key terms in your jurisdiction, that's also very important work that B-Lab needs help with. So if you're able to contribute in that way, we would also appreciate that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So, and then actually this is like purpose and stakeholder governance, which is very aligned with the mission and what it means to be a B Corp. And then I think we will have a little bit of time for question. And in Hong Kong, actually, when I talk about this slide, I actually draw attention to how it converges with the stock exchange requirements on under the corporate governance code, as well as the ESG reporting code, and how, you know, so I'm just mentioning this as an example of alignment, and you can probably say the same, which is also the key takeaway from the standards review process, that countries might be at different pace of implementing, but we didn't identify any barriers, and that is actually really about contextualizing each of this in the respective jurisdictions. So it is a holistic but interoperable standards that can be used globally across sector and for large and small companies. So I really applaud the B-Lab team in terms of being so thoughtful, and all of this work that has gone into standards development. I was very careful to say that we were involved in standards review, which is really the easier bit and really a learning for all the lawyers involved, but we were really kind of in awe with the support that the B-Lab provided the team in terms of the materials that they went through, in terms of the source, the thinking around each of these requirements. That's something that, you know, I want to kind of take the opportunity to really share this kind of respect that I have, and applaud the B-Lab standards team for how much they've done for the standards development process. Yeah, it was really wonderful.
Absolutely, and we got a lot of expertise from a lot of different sectors on that. I myself, although my work does not touch the standards, the details of the standards very much. I do work with a team that helped develop the standards, and every time I do, I learn a great deal, right? So yeah, a lot of great work is happening over there. And we also get expertise and advice from other organizations that are sort of within the same sector. We had other nonprofits doing similar work help to advise us on the standards themselves, defining some of our terms and some of our benchmarks that we put into the standards. So this is a collective effort. One of B Lab's key sort of values is interdependence. So we rely on our communities, both our legal experts, but also other nonprofits doing similar work for their expertise.
Yeah, thank you. I truly believe that this is like a gift that keeps giving. And if I can bring in one topic, because I look at TCFD and TNFD, nature, and that's the risk lens that most investment managers kind of think about. But when you think about impact investing and you want to think about what it looks like, then like the session earlier about nature governance and thinking about nature in a holistic way, the BLAC framework allows you to do that. So I think that's really what excites me and sort of in the work that we do as impact lawyers. Yeah, so I have this set of questions just for us to think about if you want to get started helping B Corps around you to think about where they are and which is the sort of the intersection point or intervention that you could start to consider. But maybe we'll kind of have a little bit of time for questions. I think we have about 3 or 5 minutes, yeah. Yes, yeah, Christina? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I think the presentation was great. We were part of the project. I think we could make some law firm which we are certified with the B Corp just to be part of the learning queue, because we are also going to have to comply with these standards. I know Julie's here also, so perhaps it's something we can think about, a group of girls law firm members. But my question is particularly which one of these impact topics you think will be more challenging for companies to understand and comply. I think human rights is one of the most sensitive. We discussed this yesterday, but I really like to know your opinion, of course.
Do you want to offer your views on it?
I do not have a view on it. I don't either. I truly don't. I think that some of the impact topics we have currently, there's overlap with the old ones. So B Corps are familiar, at least somewhat, with those topics. But I think that the new ones that were introduced, because they're unfamiliar, and we don't really have a record of how we've dealt with them in the past, I think it's tough.
Yeah,
I believe.
Yeah, I think that is also a very fair point, because it is quite greenfield in some respect. And I think this is also where we kind of should come together as a community. And I totally take that point, and I think that's a great idea for us to maybe do this sort of workshop and develop, particular impact topics that we can extend what it looks like business and human rights dimension, and the sort of what kind of processes should be in place, the ESG due diligence, or even kind of alignment with CSTDD. So that's one topic on its own. So I actually asked, during our workshop in Hong Kong, we asked questions and we got a response, and most people are most concerned with climate. And I think that's because the regulatory and policy environment in Hong Kong right now is climate, green transition. So the banks are putting pressure on the companies, and they feel like that's where they need to do the most work. But actually, I kind of said that, actually, you don't know what else is coming, because nature is a much bigger topic. So that's around the corner. And so, but it's going to differ. I think one of the things is, how do we support capacity building of the companies that really need this, right? And so it differs in terms of large companies that already have the resources, and maybe they already have the sector pathways that is alignment. then it's more like maybe the small and medium enterprises that needs the support. So as a funds lawyer, I also increasingly talk about if you need capacity building, we need to think about funding for capacity building. So it's a holistic ecosystem that we need to continue to build this. So yeah.
I have a little bit of an answer. So from my limited experience negotiating our agreements with B Corps or prospective B Corps, I find that the issues are less around the actual impact topics and more about the requirements for disclosure and transparency. So we have different requirements now with the new standards that I suspect to have some pushback on. So as far as capacity building, I think working with companies around their expectations around disclosure and transparency, I think would be very helpful.
Yeah, so it's all connected. Thank you for
Yes.
that. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I think we have just 5 more minutes. Any other questions? Oh, okay. Thanks, Naveen.
Nice loud voice, okay.
Build on that. I mean, so with the complexity, added transparency, do you see or do you anticipate, or what is BLAB thinking about in terms of potential fall off and potential for, segmentation in terms of certain types of companies that can sort of meet these standards, but then losing the ability to kind of open the funnel and allow for more companies to meet the index?
That is an excellent question. And to be honest, that is the elephant in the room for all of the discussions we have around implementing the new standards. It's a concern we have. Of course, we want the community to, we want a robust community, but not everyone is going to be able to meet the new standards, and we understand that. We have no idea as far as the number now. At this point, we're doing everything we can to prepare our current community to meet the new standards. So putting out materials for them so that they can prepare themselves, get their documentation and their processes in order so that they can meet the new requirements, but also in the regions. And I'm going to take this time to encourage people to reach out to their regional BLAB entity. We all heard from Mari, who is in our Europe global partner. But we also have Sistema B in Latin America and our US and Canada regional partner, and developing ones in Africa and across Asia as well. But those entities work most closely with B Corps, and they are invested in helping B Corps meet the new standards. So they each have their own programs and processes for helping. I know that in US and Canada, and I just know this because I also support that regional entity with their legal matters, but they have a pilot program in place, or they're implementing a pilot program to help certain early adopters of the new standards with a gap analysis to sort of help them identify the gap between where they are now and what they would need to do to meet the new standards. This is free of charge to the participants in the pilot. And it feels like, honestly, really helpful for both us and the B Corps. So these things are in place. We're hoping to do all we can to get as many companies on board as possible, but we have no idea yet what the fall off will be.
Yeah.
Right.
Where it could also impact those that are thinking about becoming benefit corporations, because they're going to be like, well, wait a minute, is this going to be imported into my business too?
Right. There's some conflation here. There are benefit corporations that are not certified B Corps. So, right, right. Yeah, uncertainty is difficult. I imagine it's hard to run a business without a certainty around what you'd be expected to do and perform. So I don't have insight into that. I do. We want as many companies as possible to have that mission lock and to be considering other stakeholders in the way they operate their business, even if they're not certified B corporations. So I will say that. Ooh, we're at time here.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I wanted to pick up, yeah, so thank you for bringing that point about the regional or local B Lab partners, because I should have mentioned, I do a lot of work with the B Market Builder, Hong Kong, Macau, and also B Market Builder or B Lab Southeast Asia. And so that is really a community that we're building. And so the idea is that we can then have also that strong group of lawyers through Gale that can partner with B Lab and the B Lab regional partners. And I would just say one last thing, because actually Deborah's question is the case in point, because each jurisdiction, each region is going through just this complexity. You know, I guess Asia is actually at this point leading. I'm saying this because I was just kind of picking up on what SBTI shared in terms of climate action, and they were saying that Asia is clearly leading. And the kind of conversation I'm having in Hong Kong and Malaysia and in Singapore is that large corporates want to do more. And in fact, the consensus now is like the financial institutions are sort of at an inflection point because of EU, SFDR, sort of the greenwashing concerns, having to have more concrete framework for impact investing. But in the meantime, the corporates are the ones that we are taking on board. We get it. We have to be sustainable. It's not a nice to have. It's a resiliency. And so B-Lab standards become a North Star that is useful for them to adopt. So that is my response to that concern. It's very much driven by local context necessarily, but I have hope around that. Yeah.
Right, and as time progresses and we really get into our groove with the new standards, we hope that companies can see the benefit to being certified as a B corporation and will join us.
The movement.
The movement, right, get back on board, because having that badge, that certified B corporation badge, carries value. It's measurable. We have the studies that we've had folks perform. It carries a benefit for the company and its reputation as well. So we're hoping that as we become more sophisticated with implementing the new standards and just really showing that this is positive, this is beneficial, you know, that companies will see that and come back on board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So hope that means we finish on a positive note.
Yes.
We are quite in sync. We didn't plan this, but we're color coordinated, as you see. So we're both very surprised and can't stop laughing about it. So,
Right.
all right. Thank you very much for
Thank
joining
you
us for this
all.
session. Thank you.